Greetings and welcome to another lecture in Introductory Psychology. This one involves the various types of stress that we may find ourselves experiencing. I suspect that you're going to find some of these familiar, perhaps too familiar in some cases. Well, the first type of stress I'm going to talk about is frustration. Now, frustration is when we are trying to reach a goal and that goal is being blocked. We're trying to get somewhere, we're trying to finish something, and we're being stopped from getting there. We're being stopped from finishing it. So something like a traffic jam. You're trying to get from here to there and you can't. Or you're trying to finish up a task and you don't have everything you need to finish. Or something is stopping you from being able to get to where you want to be. Now, frustration is very, very common. The only really good thing about frustration is generally it doesn't last very long. And it doesn't necessarily have a lot of after effects. You know, you're in the traffic jam, it takes you 10 minutes to get somewhere, it normally takes you 3. And sure, you're frustrated and you're angry, but then when you get where you're going, hopefully you'll calm down and go about your day. Unless you're one of those people that like to relive things and tell people about how horrible everything is, which, by the way, is not necessarily healthy. A little venting is good, but a lot of it just stirs everything back up again. More about that in another lecture. Another source of stress is change. Human beings are creatures of habit. We like things to stay the same. We like to be able to predict what's going to happen. Again, I'll talk a little bit about more of that in another lecture. And when things start changing on us, it makes us kind of stressed out because we can't rely on how things are going to be. We can't predict how things are going to go. Because even if it's something as simple as, well, normally my bus leaves at 7:30, but they've changed it and now it leaves at 7:35. Even something that minor might have an effect on you because you're waiting longer. You're like, oh, I can't get to where I'm going. Here comes the frustration. And I mean, there are people that deal with change better than others. All of these types of stress, how much you feel depends a lot on the individual. Again, that's another lecture. But for most of us, we like to be able to predict what's going to happen. We like to have some idea what's going to happen. Or if we can't always predict what's going to happen, we'd like to know, we'd like to have some control over just how much this new stuff is going to come in, that sort of thing. But change itself can be stressful. Pressure. I sometimes think that college and university is not just to allow people to learn tasks that they may need to know how to do and learn information they may need in the future, but it's also to teach people how to deal with pressure. Pressure is an expectation to live up to a certain standard. And that standard might be set by you. It might be set by me, your professor. It might be set by your employer. It might be set by your family. It might be set, but the pressure is that you are to perform up to that level. And so therefore, there is lots and lots of pressure in a lot of our lives because we always have people, we always have ourselves expecting us to perform to a certain level, which we may or may not be able to do. If you're going to school full time and you have to work, your boss is probably going to want you to spend more time at work than school, but your professor is going to expect you to spend however much time on their classes as they expect. And then the family comes in with their own pressures, and you might have pressures. Oh, I want to get an A, I have to get an A, I have to get a B. That's more pressure, and there you are. Definitely stress causing. Now, catastrophe is a little bit like change, but sort of taken to an exponential degree. In catastrophe, everything goes wrong. Now, catastrophe could be a personal catastrophe, maybe health related. A person becomes very ill, or a house burns down, that sort of catastrophe. A catastrophe can also be more of a global or a general thing. A hurricane or a nor'easter or an earthquake that basically comes, a forest fire that comes and just destroys the general environment. And everything is different, and the frustration and change and pressure and everything else all kind of boil down. Definitely stress inducing. Hassles are kind of the opposite of catastrophe. Hassles are all sorts of little tiny things that by themselves are nothing. They're little tiny things, but they add up. Okay? So all those little frustrations and all those little changes and all those little pressures that individually look like nothing, they pile up and they pile up and they pile up. If you've ever heard the saying, the straw that broke the camel's back, Camels are very strong. Straws are very light. But if you load a camel up enough, just one more straw can basically just, snap that poor baby's back. And that's why people say something is the last straw and that sort of stuff. And you might all have been there. If you've ever seen someone have a complete and utter meltdown over what seems like nothing. Okay? I have seen people have complete and utter meltdowns over the fact that the college cafeteria ran out of fried chicken. And they just get angry. And anger, by the way, is a common reaction to frustration, which is what this would be. You want to reach the goal of yummy fried chicken, and you can't. And angry, and they want to stamp around, and they probably want to slam things around, and they're just bad. And you're like, whoa, it's chicken. Have a hamburger. It's not that big of a deal. Well, no, it's not just the chicken. It's everything that leads up to it. It's, the lack of sleep and the broken alarm clock and getting harassed at work and the kids are sick and the homework was due and the test didn't go well and then it's the chicken. So hassles, remember all the little things that add up. Now, conflict is actually not what you think it is. This is one of the cases where this does not mean in science what it means in English, at least not in psychology. Conflict here means that a person has to make a choice. They have to make a choice between two or more things, or events, or behaviors. They can only choose one, and they have to make a choice. Now, before you say to me, well, making a choice is not hard, really think about it. Choice is difficult because we're always thinking, should I do this or should I do that? Should I do this or should I do that? I don't know. We're always afraid we're going to pick the wrong one. Which line do I get in at the grocery store? It doesn't matter. Whichever one I get in is going to be longer. So I'll switch lines. Oh my goodness. Now this line's moving. That can be very stressful having to make a decision. It's why people, when they find that the fried chicken is not available, will stand and look at the menu board for 10 or 15 minutes trying to figure out what to have. Because I'll get the hamburger. Well, maybe no, I get the hamburger. I should probably get a salad. A salad's healthier. But, I don't really want a salad. I want something warm. Maybe I'll get soup. Well, if I get soup, I might as well get a hamburger. Maybe I could get a side salad with the hamburger. No, that's a little bit too expensive. Let's get the soup and maybe we'll get, bread with the soup. No, I probably shouldn't have bread. And what kind of soup is it? Okay, that's conflict. And we're always going back and forth as to what we need to do. Now, there are various types of conflict depending on exactly what are the choices that you have. For instance, there's one that's called approach conflict. Now, the idea is that it's named what it is. If you approach something, the odds are that you want it, that you like it, right? Approach conflict is when you have to decide between two things, both of which you want. So there's two items that you want for lunch, but you could only have one. There's two movies you want to go see, but you can only go see one. Okay, that sort of thing. There's two pieces of clothing that you want, but you can only afford one. Okay, I mean, that's what we're talking about. And no, it's not the most stress-inducing thing. Although I have, like I said, seen people who, when given a choice between two things, both of which they want, they spend an awful long time just going, oh, I don't know, which one should I get? Which one should I get? I don't know. Which is kind of stressful. Not only for them, but for you, watching them going, pick something. Avoidance, on the other hand, is truly nasty. Because when you avoid something, you think that you don't want it, and you'd be exactly right. So avoidance conflict, you have to choose between two things, neither of which you want. But you have to pick one of them. Okay? You've got a toothache. You have two choices. You can do nothing and continue with the toothache, and it might get worse and be in pain. Or you can go to the dentist and spend a lot of money and be in a lot more pain for a short period of time, but eventually fix it, which you're going to do. Well, they're like, that's why a lot of people don't go to the dentist. They hope it magically goes away. Or in terms of students picking classes. Sometimes, for a lot of people, an avoidance conflict would be, okay, which do you want to take? Physics or statistics? People raise their hand and go, neither. Or which do you want to take? Organic chemistry or invertebrate zoology, or something. I mean, pick the really nasty stuff that a lot of people don't want to take. Personally, I like statistics. I didn't much like physics. I actually also did pretty well both organic and invertebrate. But at any rate, fill those in with the two classes of your choice. that you don't like, but you have to pick one. And avoidance conflict is nasty, because no matter which one you pick, you're not going to like it. It's the opposite of approach in that way. Approach, you can say, well, whichever one I pick, I'm going to like it. Avoidance, you're guaranteed not to like whichever one you pick, which means that it's really very difficult to do and very stress-inducing. Now, looking at this, you think that this would be easy because you have two choices, and so you look at the good. No, that's not what it means. They changed the rules for this one. Approach avoidance conflict is when you're looking at the good and the bad side of the same choice. So it's less, do I do this or do I do that, and more, do I do this or not? Okay. And so you're looking at the good and the bad of doing that particular behavior. Well, the good of this is that this will happen and that will happen and I'll be able to do this, but the bad of it is that I'll have to do that and then this might happen and blah blah. So you look at the good and the bad of the same situation. For instance, I should really not be drinking regular Pepsi, although I love Pepsi and I can't drink diet because the diet sweetener does horrible things to me. But sometimes, I just really want a Pepsi, and so I do approach avoidance stress, unfortunately, approach avoidance conflict, which is, the approach part is, oh, that would taste so good, oh, that lovely malted, sugary, battered acid, good, every set of caffeine, that, and of course the avoidance is, well, it's bad for you, it's expensive, it's bad for your teeth, it's bad for your pancreas, you're going to wind up diabetic if you drink a lot of it, and it could wind up with heart disease, but then of course the approach is, oh, but it would taste so good, that would have heart disease. No. We humans are very, very bad, as are most animals, at looking to the future and actually behaving now in a way to benefit the future, because we want to behave now in a way that benefits now. And pleasure now tends to outweigh longevity for a lot of people. But that would be approach avoidance. Now, what's more common than approach avoidance would be what's called double approach avoidance. In double approach avoidance, you have two options, and you're looking at the good and the bad side of both of those options. This is probably more real world than most of the rest of them, because we're always looking at the pros and the cons, as they say, the good side and the bad side. Do I want to major in this, or do I want to major in that? Well, the good part of majoring is this, the bad part of majoring is this, is that. The good part of majoring in that is this, the good part of majoring in that. So you get the idea. Or, which lunch do I want to have? This is more expensive but healthier. This one is less expensive but less healthy. That's double approach avoidance. Do I want the Pepsi that I already went through the pros and the cons? Or do I want, for instance, a glass of water, which is very healthy and it's free and it's good for me, but it is boring and bland and it doesn't have caffeine in it? So that's double. And there's actually something called multiple approach avoidance, where you have more than two options. If you have 3 or 4 or 5 options that you're looking at the good and the bad about, that's called multiple approach avoidance. So all of these, from frustration all the way down, cause stress to a greater or lesser extent. And these are all things that, we can't remove them from our lives, and quite frankly, we wouldn't want to. But it sometimes helps to be able to recognize when you're sort of stuck in them, so you can minimize the stress, or at least the bad stress.